Let's go straight to the events of 2 months ago, which I am trying to comprehend. At that time, I was 32 years old, my girlfriend was 25, and her younger sister was 21. Looking back, we can say that the relationship with my girlfriend lasted only 7 months. All this time, I was happy and harmonious. Moreover, I even came to the conclusion that she is the woman with whom I want to spend the rest of my life. But I doubted that 7 months is really enough time to make such an important decision. At this stage of my life, I was thinking about the idea of getting married. At first, I had doubts and reservations, but upon closer examination, I did not find any significant alarming signs. Considering my age, I have a stable job with a satisfactory income, and it seems that all my friends have started their way to starting a family. In this regard, I thought about starting a family myself, and what could be better than a person I love very much? I strive to have an ordinary family because I don't really like the modern culture of moms. Instead, I dream of a soulmate with whom I can raise my children. I grew up within the walls of the church, and throughout my upbringing, I have always had a deep sense of belonging to it. After moving to a new place of residence, I began to look for a local church near my apartment. Having become an active participant in the life of this community, I decided to devote my time and energy to work as a volunteer in the charity organization Elder Brother, Elder Sister organized by the church. It was during one of these volunteer events that fate intervened in my life, and I met an extraordinary woman who soon became my friend. Her parents, driven by an unwavering passion for helping disadvantaged youth, instilled the same values in her. This shared dedication to making a positive impact on the lives of others has brought us closer together, cementing our bond. The charity event itself was carefully planned and carried out, which ensured its effectiveness in helping those in need. The woman I met in church seemed to be the embodiment of love, care, and an ingrained sense of tradition. Her appearance was pleasant to look at, and she seemed to have a kind spirit. During our communication, she constantly demonstrated reliability, which created a sense of security in our relationship. At first, there were no signs of excessive partying, drunkenness, or any questionable behavior on her part. We sincerely confessed our love to each other, and it turned out that we had similar aspirations for the future. I used to be a hopeless romantic, always longing for that perfect connection, and when I met her, it seemed to me that fate had finally smiled on me. Our relationship seemed like a dream to me, a heavenly couple, but I didn't know yet that paradise would suddenly collapse. It all started after a stormy birthday celebration at which everything took an unexpected turn. For no reason at all, my girlfriend turned to me with an unusual request, which led me to bewilderment. She offered to open our relationship starting with her 25th birthday. This proposal marked the beginning of a whirlwind of events that changed our lives forever. On the day of her 25th birthday, the story of a love triangle unfolds, implicated in jealousy, sibling rivalry, revenge, excessive emotions, attempted murder, and the destruction of romantic and family ties. This event was given great importance, and she wanted it to be unusual. A few months before the celebration, careful preparation was carried out, culminating in a week-long romantic trip during which numerous vacation spots were explored. As a result, the celebration turned into a Saturday evening attended by selected family members and friends, including her beloved friends who came from out of state. I took on most of the financial responsibility, as my girlfriend wanted this event to be exceptional, as she would invite her college friends from out of town, whom I had not had time to meet yet. As planned, we were going to have a cozy meeting with friends in an Airbnb rented for a day. Everything was going well until my girlfriend's younger sister suddenly appeared, who was 21 years old and who was going through a difficult period in her life. It is worth noting that she has amazing beauty, even surpassing the appearance of my girlfriend. Obviously, they are not biological relatives. Let me explain that my girlfriend is certainly attractive, but their level of attractiveness is different. Let's go straight to the events of 2 months ago, which I am trying to comprehend. At that time, I was 32 years old, my girlfriend was 25, and her younger sister was 21. Looking back, we can say that the relationship with my girlfriend lasted only 7 months. All this time, I was happy and harmonious. Moreover, I even came to the conclusion that she is the woman with whom I want to spend the rest of my life. But I doubted that 7 months is really enough time to make such an important decision. At this stage of my life, I was thinking about the idea of getting married. At first, I had doubts and reservations, but upon closer examination, I did not find any significant alarming signs. Considering my age, I have a stable job with a satisfactory income, and it seems that all my friends have started their way to starting a family. In this regard, I thought about starting a family myself, and what could be better than a person I love very much? I strive to have an ordinary family because I don't really like the modern culture of moms. Instead, I dream of a soulmate with whom I can raise my children. I grew up within the walls of the church, and throughout my upbringing, I have always had a deep sense of belonging to it. After moving to a new place of residence, I began to look for a local church near my apartment. Having become an active participant in the life of this community, I decided to devote my time and energy to work as a volunteer in the charity organization Elder Brother, Elder Sister organized by the church. It was during one of these volunteer events that fate intervened in my life, and I met an extraordinary woman who soon became my friend. Her parents, driven by an unwavering passion for helping disadvantaged youth, instilled the same values in her. This shared dedication to making a positive impact on the lives of others has brought us closer together, cementing our bond. The charity event itself was carefully planned and carried out, which ensured its effectiveness in helping those in need. The woman I met in church seemed to be the embodiment of love, care, and an ingrained sense of tradition. Her appearance was pleasant to look at, and she seemed to have a kind spirit. During our communication, she constantly demonstrated reliability, which created a sense of security in our relationship. At first, there were no signs of excessive partying, drunkenness, or any questionable behavior on her part. We sincerely confessed our love to each other, and it turned out that we had similar aspirations for the future. I used to be a hopeless romantic, always longing for that perfect connection, and when I met her, it seemed to me that fate had finally smiled on me. Our relationship seemed like a dream to me, a heavenly couple, but I didn't know yet that paradise would suddenly collapse. It all started after a stormy birthday celebration at which everything took an unexpected turn. For no reason at all, my girlfriend turned to me with an unusual request, which led me to bewilderment. She offered to open our relationship starting with her 25th birthday. This proposal marked the beginning of a whirlwind of events that changed our lives forever. On the day of her 25th birthday, the story of a love triangle unfolds, implicated in jealousy, sibling rivalry, revenge, excessive emotions, attempted murder, and the destruction of romantic and family ties. This event was given great importance, and she wanted it to be unusual. A few months before the celebration, careful preparation was carried out, culminating in a week-long romantic trip during which numerous vacation spots were explored. As a result, the celebration turned into a Saturday evening attended by selected family members and friends, including her beloved friends who came from out of state. I took on most of the financial responsibility, as my girlfriend wanted this event to be exceptional, as she would invite her college friends from out of town, whom I had not had time to meet yet. As planned, we were going to have a cozy meeting with friends in an Airbnb rented for a day. Everything was going well until my girlfriend's younger sister suddenly appeared, who was 21 years old and who was going through a difficult period in her life. It is worth noting that she has amazing beauty, even surpassing the appearance of my girlfriend. Obviously, they are not biological relatives. Let me explain that my girlfriend is certainly attractive, but their level of attractiveness is different. As my friend told me, after giving birth, her mother had medical complications as a result of which she could not have more children. In this regard, her parents decided to adopt her younger sister when she was 5 years old. As a result, a complicated relationship developed between my girlfriend and her younger sister, fluctuating between love and hate. My girlfriend's younger sister made her uncomfortable when she was around me, and my girlfriend scolded her when she asked me for money. At first, I sympathized with my younger sister, feeling that she was being treated unfairly and spoken to disrespectfully. She trusted me in a way she wouldn't trust anyone else, and a bond developed between us. Therefore, from time to time, I did not object to providing her with financial assistance. It became our little secret, and she visited me from time to time. Only later did I understand the reason for their mutual dislike, since they both hid it. Everything was going smoothly until suddenly an explosion broke out. I had to switch my attention to preparing for my girlfriend's birthday so that we could relax after the vacation. I entrusted the organization of the holiday to her younger sister. I paid for all expenses in advance, including drinks, Airbnb accommodation, decorations, meals, and even DJ services. Moreover, she helped me pack a gift that I bought for my girlfriend for her birthday, expressing surprise at its price. She often made peculiar remarks, for example, claiming that her older sister was not worthy of me or making similar comments. I usually attributed this to their typical rivalry, as they often said negative things about each other. Despite this, they sometimes spent time together, so I thought that this was the usual dynamics of the relationship between sisters and did not pay much attention to it. My financial situation was stable, so I had no problems with spending money. I often told her that I would do anything for my girlfriend. It was noticeable that her younger sister was in love with me, and she was considered more physically attractive for obvious reasons. We have never delved into this topic, but when the birthday came on Saturday, the once modest event turned into a stormy celebration attended by many strangers who turned out to be friends of my girlfriend. Admiring my girlfriend and her 9 amazing friends, I felt the satisfaction of knowing that she was mine. Interestingly, with the exception of her sister and a few close acquaintances, most of those present were strangers to me. I hadn't encountered them before. There were only a few of my male friends, so because of this, most of the attendees were women. As the music got louder and the alcohol flowed more freely, everyone was overcome by a feeling of relaxation. My girlfriend's behavior seemed strange to me, unlike her usual demeanor. I had to blink a few times to make sure I wasn't dreaming. The music continued to play as the women gathered in the center of the hall, engaged in close dancing and socializing with a few guys. My girlfriend and her friends seemed to be having a real pleasure. This side of her was unfamiliar to me. The bright and carefree nature that she radiated when surrounded by her female friends seemed to enhance their energy even more. Imbued with alcohol, her friends were openly flirting not only with my friends but also with me. The thought flashed through my head that the bottles of alcohol should be hidden or at least minimized. I felt awkward as the situation was getting out of control. The atmosphere on the dance floor became increasingly chaotic. I was worried that my girlfriend's friend might later regret her choices or make unfounded accusations while intoxicated. In modern society, one must be careful in such matters. My friend's younger sister in particular seemed to have completely lost control of herself. She was engaged in provocative dancing, molested girls, and boys twerked. Behaved provocatively, the whole situation caused me deep embarrassment, and it seems that I was the only one who noticed it. The atmosphere was reminiscent of a scene from a hip-hop video, which took me by surprise since I had not seen it from this side before. Watching the lively crowd, I noticed that the holiday did not bother anyone. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. Amid the fun, I felt like the only responsible person since I decided not to drink. It seemed that I was the most adult in this room, even as my girlfriend enthusiastically danced with her friends. Their movements were so synchronized that it seemed as if they were dancing in perfect harmony. The intensity of the party was rapidly increasing, and I suspected that this was not the first time she had behaved in this way throughout the event. I couldn't stop thinking about it. One of my girlfriend's friends was clearly flirting with me, and surprisingly, my girlfriend wasn't bothered by it. I couldn't shake the suspicion that it might be some kind of trap. Even more unpleasant was that she openly flirted in front of my girlfriend, casually making remarks about the cake being shared, and it amused them both. I felt completely out of place, like a fish out of water. The implication of her words was very clear, but I tried to dismiss it as an internal joke only the two of them owned. As events unfolded, it became clear that her words had the meaning that I had originally assumed. After the party, my girlfriend expressed a desire to have a bachelorette party with her friends, excluding all men. It is worth noting that her younger sister was with them, which will later turn out to be an important detail. Knowing what had happened during their party, I couldn't help but feel uneasy about the whole thing. I reluctantly agreed to let her go with her drunken friends despite my objections. She managed to make me feel guilty by mentioning that her friends had come a long way to see her and she wanted them to have fun. I reluctantly agreed, and while she went for a walk with her sister and friends, unbeknownst to me, they went to a strip club. The next morning, when she returned home, I asked about her whereabouts, and she lied, saying that they had just returned to the hotel when she dozed off. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to ask how her friend had behaved the night before, but she answered dismissively, blaming everything solely on alcohol. She calmly stated that they had a great time, implying that the pleasure outweighed any negative consequences. This revelation made me think about what she might be like in my absence when she comes to her friends at college. It became more and more obvious that my idea of her as a student was very limited, and observing her communication with old comrades shed light on previously unknown sides of her personality. The next day was Sunday, and we planned to spend time together after attending church service, but feeling exhausted by the events of the previous evening, we decided to stay at home and order food. Thoughts were spinning in my head about what had happened during this eventful evening, and I had a lot of questions for my girlfriend. While we were sitting on the bed and eating, I couldn't help but think about her friend's unpleasant remark to me, comparing me to a birthday cake for her. Nervously, I plucked up the courage and asked if she had ever shared a boyfriend with her friend. Her immediate reaction was disgust when she looked at me and firmly pronounced the word no. After a short pause, her eyes met mine again, indicating that she wanted to say something, but she hardly found the right words. In the end, she asked if I would mind if we attracted other couples as well. Filled with anger, I quickly got out of bed, feeling as if she had just confessed to spending time with a friend and her boyfriend. She followed me into the living room, desperately trying to justify her words. When I tried to make sense of her words, it became clear that she insisted on excluding the presence of any other man. Instead, she suggested that only me and her chosen life partner participate in the meeting. Surprisingly, she expressed her willingness to give me the freedom to realize any of my desires, offering to start a free relationship before tying the knot. It dawned on me that she had been subtly preparing me for this revelation for a long time, and I was amazed at how thoughtfully she approached this conversation. Stunned, I sank down on the sofa in the living room, trying to comprehend the gravity of what she had just revealed to me. I was at a loss listening to the words that came out of my girlfriend's mouth. I felt inferior, unable to satisfy her desires. After thinking about it, I plucked up the courage and said that this way of life does not suit me personally. We were both sitting on the couch, and there was an awkward silence between us. Sensing my indecision, she assured me that we didn't have to do this if I didn't like it. Curiosity was born in me, and I cautiously asked how she used to feel about a free relationship and whether she had an affair with her friend's boyfriend. With unexpected abruptness, she turned to me and resolutely denied her involvement in this. Unsurprisingly, she often discusses celebrities who adhere to this lifestyle, but only when it comes to others. I never thought that we would ever think about it ourselves. It was obvious that she had been thinking about it for a long time, and it was not a spontaneous decision. If she had expressed her desire to have such a relationship from the very beginning, I would have been able to make an informed decision and understand her point of view. Out of pure curiosity, I asked if there were intimate contacts with both women and men in her conversations. To this, she calmly replied that she was doing what was convenient for her. Intrigued, I asked if she had any experience in such matters. This time, there was a hint in her answer that before our meeting, she was in a free relationship during her student years. In search of further clarity, I asked a hypothetical question about what a free relationship would look like. In response, she stressed the importance of honesty and transparency in such relationships, magical, filled with love and consent to live together. She said that we should be honest about any intimate encounters outside of our relationship and even offered the possibility of intimate contact together in a threesome. I was stunned by her words. It was hard for me to believe what I heard. I kindly explained to my girlfriend that I respectfully declined her offer and was not interested in an open relationship. Her reaction was disappointed, and she seemed to be on the verge of tears, expressing her opinion that I lack an open mind, especially considering the time we live in. There was a feeling that she was trying to present the idea of a free relationship as something tempting and desirable, while everyone else seemed to be following a certain trend. I found myself falling behind, and in the depths of my soul, I had a suspicion that she was unfaithful and was thinking about someone else besides her friend. She accused me of being boring and claimed that bringing some animation into our relationship would be good for us. In response to this, I stated that I didn't see anything wrong with our relationship. She claimed that most men, if they had the opportunity, would gladly jump at the chance to be with other women, but I made it clear that I did not share this point of view. She holds a special place in my heart, and I can't bear the thought of having to share her with others. Recently, she told me about an incident at her birthday party when a girl molested me. I remembered an awkward situation when this girl, who called me birthday cake, shamelessly flirted with me in the presence of my friend. Surprisingly, she offered to engage in an intimate threesome relationship today since she is leaving on Monday. At first, I thought her suggestion was funny, believing that she was not serious, but as the situation developed, I quickly declined her offer, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. When I got up to throw out the trash, I found that my girlfriend was FaceTiming the very girl from the party who expressed a desire to have fun with me. The situation was certainly uncomfortable. My girlfriend continued the conversation, mentioning that, in her opinion, the girl's offer to share me was just a joke. Then it dawned on me that my girlfriend was really considering a threesome with her friend. Not knowing how to react, I pretended not to pay attention to them, hoping to avoid further embarrassment. Just at the moment when it seemed to me that the situation could not get any more awkward, my girlfriend came up to me. She gently put her hands on my shoulders, creating a warm embrace. At this time, her friend stayed on FaceTime, watching what was happening. Trying to remain polite, I awkwardly smiled at her friend, but to my surprise, her friend suddenly lifted her t-shirt, exposing herself to me. Both my girlfriend and her friend burst out laughing, from which my girlfriend fell into a fit of merriment. I was left at a loss, trying to make sense of what had happened. Despite all the moral limitations, I joined in the laughter, giving up trying to rationalize the situation for a moment. Despite the difficulties we face, I believe that we can find a way to save our relationship. But it bothers me that my girlfriend is trying to introduce another woman into our lives, even if she is attractive. In this situation, the possible consequences are not taken into account, and our religious affiliation, including recent church attendance, is not taken into account. At first, I thought of agreeing to it, but as the evening progressed, I changed my mind. When my girlfriend insisted that we go to the hotel with her friend, I refused, which angered her. As a result, she went to the hotel alone, leaving me in the dark about her intentions for the evening. When she left, I couldn't help but feel regret for not accompanying her. The thought flashed through my mind that I should contact her and tell her that my opinion had changed, but I rejected it. Instead, I was seized by an inexplicable desire to confide in someone else. I found solace in talking to her younger sister, with whom it has always been a pleasure for me to communicate. It's no secret that she and my girlfriend had a stormy relationship, and she often expressed her complaints to me about their conflicts. There was a connection between us, and I felt her attraction to me, but we never thought about anything more than just friendship for obvious reasons. I contacted her sister that evening to express my gratitude to her for organizing the birthday party. During the conversation, we playfully discussed her flirtation, which, as it turned out, applies to both men and women. To my surprise, she told me that my girlfriend, her sister, is also interested in women and asked me not to judge her. So, we moved on to the unexpected revelation that my girlfriend aspires to a free relationship. During this conversation, she told me that her sister used to be in a free relationship, and my girlfriend, like her friends, had common boyfriends back in her student years. She emphasized the same negative aspects that she had previously said about her sister, saying that she was a hypocrite who could pretend to be a virtuous girl. Apparently, her church-going is just a facade which she skillfully hides from everyone, even from her own parents. My friend also listed all the insults that my girlfriend caused her during their joint upbringing. Despite the fact that she was adopted, everyone unfairly called her a problem sister. I began to trust her words when she told me that her sister and friends visited a strip club after celebrating her birthday. It had to remain a secret, and she shouldn't have exposed them. According to her, her sister and several of her friends engaged in inappropriate actions with strippers, and she had photo evidence on her phone confirming her words. The amount of information received was simply staggering. It seemed like I had gone from a blissful week-long vacation with a woman I thought was my soulmate to her telling me she wanted a free relationship, and now I find out that she went to a men's strip club with her friends and cheated on me with a stripper. I was completely confused. The person next to me was unrecognizable, and I was overcome by a mixture of confusion and anger. All I wanted was to clear my head, so I turned to my girlfriend's younger sister and asked if she wanted to take a walk with me. She agreed, and I followed her to her parents' house. During our leisurely walk, an unexpected chain of events unfolded, leading to an unforeseen incident in my car. It is worth noting that this incident occurred without alcohol consumption and was mutually desired by both sides. After that, a heartfelt conversation ensued between us, during which she revealed more personal information than ever before. It was during this intimate conversation that she finally confessed to me about the long-standing rift between her and her sister. In addition, she plucked up the courage and told me about her deep personal experience when she was only 18 years old, about her first romantic relationship with a guy. Shockingly, she told me about an unpleasant case when she unexpectedly found her boyfriend in a compromising situation with my current girlfriend. I discovered that my girlfriend was behaving inappropriately in her room. To my surprise, she was involved with her younger sister's boyfriend while having her own relationship. When the younger sister boldly told about the incident, her parents rejected her words, calling her a liar. This unfair treatment of her younger sister increased her rebellious nature, and she began to believe that her status as a foster mother made her the object of their hostility. Even my girlfriend and her ex-boyfriend joined in, accusing her of making up stories. In the end, the younger sister broke off her relationship with her cheating boyfriend after his older sister left him. The younger one accused her of stalking her boyfriend out of jealousy of her own appearance, although there were other problems between them, but this one seems to have been the main cause. When she told me this story, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being used as a pawn in their constant enmity. Suddenly, it became clear why she initiated our intimacy in my car and why she interfered in my relationship. Perhaps it was all a form of revenge. I asked about the nature of our actions, asking if she was motivated by revenge. To my surprise, she denied it, declaring her long-standing affection for me. At the same time, she strongly recommended that I keep our relationship a secret, fearing a possible reaction from my sister who would find out the truth. She further stated that my girlfriend was mentally unstable, stressing that I did not know her true character, and even claimed that my girlfriend had repeatedly tried to harm her. I considered her statement somewhat exaggerated since they did not correspond to the person with whom I have been living for several months. In addition, she expressed fears that my girlfriend might tell their parents about our relationship. As they became more and more touchy, their dismissive attitude towards her intensified. Despite this, she expressed a desire for us to keep in touch, parting amicably. We kept the hope of preserving our relationship, but deep down, I suspected that my girlfriend had already cheated on me. When I got home, I fell asleep from fatigue. To my horror, I woke up to the fact that my girlfriend was trying to strangle me. I fought desperately for my release, without ceasing to strike and verbally attack, accusing me of having cheated on her with her own sister and inflicting hurtful insults. In the midst of all this chaos, I couldn't understand why she resorted to physical violence. I was completely stunned by how she found out the truth. It turned out that her younger sister confessed to my girlfriend, apparently with the aim of hurting her. I was shocked to realize how insidious her sister could be, and I felt that she was being manipulated. I couldn't deny the truth, but I tried to defend myself by telling about the involvement of a stripper. But my girlfriend categorically denied the fact of physical intimacy. I also asked her a question about the moral consequences of intimacy with her sister's boyfriend, expressing my opinion that it was initially wrong. She said her sister was a real liar, that she has a habit of sleeping with her boyfriends, and that's why my girlfriend doesn't want me to communicate with her younger sister. This caused the interlocutor to be perplexed, and I pointed out that nothing like this would have happened if she had not offered an open relationship and had not entered into an intimate relationship with other people. In response, she clarified that it was only about the girl and not about any other man. She explained that she hoped I would choose her over her sister because she thought our bond was stronger, but her sister's charm and appeal proved too irresistible for me to resist. It was difficult for me to make a decision, but in the end, I chose her sister. As she poured out her heart, tears streamed down her face. It became obvious that her trust had been destroyed, and her emotions were very strong. She expressed her disappointment with her sister's behavior, listing many cases when she was let down and betrayed. There was pain in her voice. She spoke of her sincere resentment and desire to build a strong relationship with her sister despite the constant meanness. She invited her sister to visit, trying to help her feel like a part of the family, but her sister constantly tried to shift attention to herself. I found myself in the middle of a family quarrel that was beyond my control. Our disagreements reached the point where my friend resorted to a physical attack on me, which apparently was caused by her latent resentment that I used to communicate with her sister. Unable to bear the tense atmosphere in our apartment any longer, I went to a friend in search of solace and reflection. In the evening of the same day, a sudden realization of a deep family conflict came to me, in which I did not want to participate. I made many attempts to contact my girlfriend's younger sister, but did not receive a response until the next morning. When she did respond, she apologized in a text message and admitted that everything had come out accidentally during an argument, but I couldn't bring myself to believe her explanation. The resulting drama was too much for me. It became clear to me that I took on more than I could, and I consider myself lucky that I was unharmed. I got a lesson for the future. Instead of strangling me, my girlfriend threatened to slit my throat while I was sleeping. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, I made a difficult decision to end our relationship. A few days later, her younger sister suddenly turned to me. She expressed interest in starting a relationship with me since the older sister is no longer there. At the same time, she said that her sister had given our secret to their parents, as a result of which she started having problems at home and needed to live somewhere. Overwhelmed by the chaos of the situation, I abruptly interrupted the conversation and blocked her number. While my ex-girlfriend was not at home, I collected all her things and put them outside the door. I didn't want to talk to this crazy family anymore. For a while, my ex-girlfriend called me and wrote to me. As a result, I blocked her number as well. I tried to come to my senses, remembering all the details of what was happening. For several days, less than a week later, I learned the terrible news from my friend, namely that my ex-girlfriend ran over her younger sister while in the car, and it was intentional. After learning this, I was glad that I got rid of their communication. As it turned out later, my girlfriend was taken into custody, and she faces a long term of imprisonment. As for her younger sister, things are much worse for her. She is in intensive care in a very serious condition and is likely to remain disabled for the rest of her life. Story 2. I am currently 27 years old, and my wife is 26. Our life together began 10 years ago when we met during our school years. We first met in 2012 when I was 17 and she was 16. Before the beginning of our relationship, I had only one person, just like my wife, never had a boyfriend. This means that we both went on a romantic trip without having enough experience. Despite our young age, we dated for 4 years before we decided to tie the knot. I knew perfectly well that our path would not be without obstacles. My wife has experienced a turbulent upbringing characterized by an unstable family environment and the lingering effects of substance abuse. That's why I became a beacon of positivity in her life. Even during her school years, she spent several days with me, and her parents seemed indifferent to her daughter's absence from home. Fortunately, my parents understood the depth of our love for each other, and from the very beginning, accepted her as a dear member of our family. I consider myself very lucky that my parents have provided me with unwavering support at every step. When I introduced my future wife to them, they took the situation with an open heart and an open soul. Both my parents come from modest families. My father, at the age of 52, has been working as a production manager at a local car factory for more than 3 decades. My mother, who is 48 years old, works as a nurse. In their spacious 5-bedroom house, there was enough space for me and my 2 older siblings, so my parents were glad of her presence. They devoted their time to truly understand and establish a relationship with my future wife. Knowing about the problems her own parents faced and the negative impact it had on her life, my parents warmly welcomed her into our family. They created a safe and affectionate environment for her that she had never encountered before. Their acceptance and warmth gave her a deep sense of belonging and stability. On her 20th birthday, she gave birth to our first son. The following year, we tied the knot and settled in our own house, conveniently located next to my parents. Despite our independence, our parents insisted that we live with them, as it was important for them to be near their beloved grandson. Since all my siblings had moved away, our spacious 5-bedroom house seemed like a complete castle. Shortly after graduating from college, I got a job as a design engineer. Despite the fact that my wife received a higher pedagogical education, we decided that she would become a stay-at-home mother to prioritize taking care of our growing family. To reduce the financial burden, my parents decided to move to a more comfortable 3-bedroom home. Although my brothers, sisters, nephews, and nieces visit us only on holidays, life knows how to throw unexpected obstacles at us, putting our determination and honesty to the test. As for me, these difficulties have played a significant role in shaping my character. At the age of 24, a number of sad events occurred in my life. It all started with the fact that my wife was expecting her third child, but tragedy struck when I was in a motorcycle accident with a near-fatal outcome. This event marked the beginning of a turbulent period. I delved into the history of my accident, went through months of hard recovery in the hospital, coped with the loss of income, and faced a huge financial burden, which forced my wife and child to seek support from my parents. Against the background of all these difficulties, the most heartbreaking discovery was that my wife was gradually losing her attachment to our relationship. When my stay in the hospital was coming to an end, I could not get rid of the feeling that my mother was the only person to whom I was truly dear. Riding a motorcycle symbolized freedom in my life. It served as an escape from everyday routine. On weekends, I went on exciting trips with my friends, although my parents were against it, especially my mother, for security reasons. However, my wife and I treasured it as a means of reconciliation and indulgence of our common passion. On that autumn day, the air was crisp, creating the perfect setting for my motorcycle adventure. When I got on the motorcycle, wanting to take a little break from the hardships of life, I was grateful that my wife, who was 8 months pregnant, was not riding with me. Not knowing what to do, a fleeting distraction would lead to chaos in my existence. As I made my way through the noisy traffic, in an instant, a collision with another car threw me into the air, and I collapsed onto the unforgiving asphalt with a force that shattered my bones. The agony and loss of consciousness that followed served as a brutal awakening to a new reality. When my consciousness awoke, a bright world of infinite possibilities opened before my eyes, replacing the clinical framework of a hospital ward. The scale of my trauma materialized, revealing a tapestry of shattered bones, hidden internal bleeding, and an overwhelming sense of physical fragility that limited me from the compassionate care of qualified healers. Gratitude overwhelmed me when I realized that my loved ones were with me, providing constant support. In particular, my mother courageously took precious minutes out of her busy work schedule with unfailing devotion to be near me. At the same time, my beloved wife, torn between her devotion to me and the responsibilities that awaited her at home, made frequent trips between the two worlds so that our connection would remain inseparable. She took care of our 2 children on her shoulders, as well as her pregnancy at the 8th month. As time passed, days turned into weeks, then into months. I underwent surgery and underwent heavy rehabilitation courses with an unwavering determination to regain mobility and independence. While my body was struggling to recover, the burden of financial obligations became more and more obvious. A long stay in the hospital led to a significant loss of income, which increased the already overwhelming feeling of uncertainty and instability in my life. Nevertheless, I persevered on my way to recovery. After the birth of my daughter, my wife began to count on the financial support of my parents. The additional responsibility for a growing family, combined with the lack of funds in case of unforeseen circumstances, only made my situation worse. When all the insurance money went to pay medical bills, I was unable to pay the mortgage. The harsh reality of our financial difficulties made me feel inferior and powerless, and my wife and 3 children were forced to seek shelter with my parents. The weight of the consequences of my accident has fallen on all of us. After a long stay in the hospital and subsequent financial difficulties, our relationship suffered. The effects of childbirth made us emotionally detached from each other, as tension made itself felt. My wife's visits were reduced to twice a week, and even then she only took the children with her. But the sight of the children during these visits brought me great joy and greatly helped my recovery. During this difficult time, my mother remained unchanged and visited me daily, providing much-needed stability. Since all the financial burden fell on my father's shoulders, our family found itself in a difficult situation. In addition, I was pleased that both my mother and my wife were with me during my stay in the hospital. At first, I didn't worry when my wife didn't show up as often as expected, believing that this was due to her responsibilities towards our growing family. I was looking forward to being discharged from the hospital, wanting to return home and join the happiness of our growing family. But as time went on, it became more and more obvious that my wife's visits had significantly decreased, and her concern for my recovery had decreased. At that moment, I did not understand the reasons for her absence, believing that it was solely due to the enormous stress and unbearable responsibilities that she carried outside the hospital. I admitted that she had to manage financial affairs alone, take care of a newborn, and withstand the emotional stress caused by my accident and subsequent hospitalization. There was no doubt that all these hardships would inevitably affect her. Nevertheless, as the days turned into weeks, her absence became more and more noticeable, and I wondered more and more often what was the catalyst for such a change in her behavior. I was so absorbed in my own recovery that I didn't understand the underlying reasons for the decrease in the number of her visits. It was only later that I realized what the problem was. The long separation had led to a noticeable gap between us, both physical and emotional. Being a mama's boy, I always relied on my mother's presence and assumed that my wife was absent because she knew that my mother would be there for me. Despite the fact that I knew that my father was providing me with financial support, I was often interested in my wife's financial well-being because I felt powerless without being a breadwinner. My mother constantly reminded me that my father provides us with everything we need. I believe that the responsibility of taking care of our extended family affected her emotional state, and she had little time and energy left to support my recovery. After 7 months spent in the hospital, the moment came when I was able to return home. But I quickly discovered that the obstacles I faced were not only related to my physical recovery. The emotional impact of the accident and the subsequent tension in a relationship left an indelible imprint on our intimate life. It was difficult for me to reconnect with my wife. The deep suffering and limitations imposed by the trauma had a strong impact on my unwillingness to participate in intimate contacts. Fear of opening wounds or experiencing any discomfort became an insurmountable obstacle, preventing me from sincerely accepting physical intimacy with my beloved wife. The ghost of the accident continued to haunt my thoughts, generating a deep fragility that prevented me from truly being present in those cherished moments. After being discharged from the hospital, I returned to work in just 2 weeks. Although it was still difficult for me to walk long distances and move awkwardly due to constant physical therapy, my mental abilities remained at the same level. Fortunately, my colleagues at work were glad to see me back, gradually recovering from the accident and recovery. I began to notice a new obstacle in my relationship with my wife. It seemed that she wanted to move out of my parents' house, which in my opinion could be the cause of this problem. Watching the growing tension between mother and wife, I began to worry. When I returned to my parents' house, I realized that my wife's involvement in the lives of our children was not as great as it seemed to me before. Despite the fact that my mother devoted herself to caring for me in the hospital, she continued to return home to take care of our children and perform her work duties. It is not surprising that this situation led to a serious conflict between my mother and my wife. Trying to relieve tension, I found it necessary to allocate a separate room to my wife, which she could consider her own. Unfortunately, the relationship between my mom and my wife has reached the point of irreparable destruction. Before I got into the accident, they had a close relationship resembling that of a mother and daughter, but after my return from the hospital, their communication began to be filled with constant quarrels. The situation was very upsetting to my parents. In this regard, we decided to move to a new apartment. It was during this move that I began to notice that an emotional distance was growing between me and my wife. She began to look more and more distant, preoccupied, and constantly busy with her phone. This sense of separation weighed heavily on me. At that time, there was one question that bothered me throughout my recovery. During intimacy, I felt a certain detachment from her, as if our intimate moments were just a task for her that she had to complete, and she couldn't wait for them to end. Perhaps this was due to the fact that I had not yet fully restored my emotional connection with my body, since my recovery was not yet complete. In the past, I usually took the initiative in the bedroom during intimacy, while she was not inclined to take responsibility or take any active part. This made me think that it would take a lot of time to fully restore our intimate relationship. Over time, it became clear that there was a deeper problem here: her constant attachment to the phone, as well as her unwillingness to have meaningful conversations and spend time together, left me alone and caused anxiety about the state of our relationship. The lack of honesty and open dialogue in our daily communication increased my insecurity and gradually destroyed the trust between us. There were doubts that made me think about whether there is a more significant factor here, whether something else is happening. I came to a startling realization of the state of our marriage, our emotional detachment, and the wife's constant preoccupation with her phone. It dawned on me that this could be our reality, at least until I fully recover. Previously, it gave me great pleasure to watch her joy and contentment during lovemaking, but when I noticed her absence and lack of participation, my own interests began to fade, and our relationship gradually turned into that of just roommates. The severity of my wife's disinterest in our relationship, combined with the difficulties associated with my recovery from the accident, gradually plunged me into depression. I was overcome by a feeling of great sadness, despair, and isolation, which prevented me from living. Children and work were the only sources of joy in my life. As I gradually lost interest in intimacy, I believed that my relationship with my wife surpassed intimacy. We were friends long before we became romantic partners, and I believed that our relationship would last. But everything changed one fateful day when my mother, with whom I often talked, called and expressed her suspicions about my father's infidelity. Since my father and I work at the same factory, my mother asked me if he was always at work. I replied that I wasn't sure because I rarely see him there, as I spend most of my time in the office. I don't run into him that often unless we happen to meet or plan to have lunch together. Then she asked if my father had any attractive female subordinates. I answered hesitantly because I didn't pay attention to his direct subordinates and had no reason to know. Underestimating my mom's fears and dismissing them as paranoia was a serious mistake on my part, which I deeply regret. I did not take into account her experiences and the problems she faced, and for this, I am sincerely ashamed. To my surprise, returning home in the evening, my wife and I found humor in this situation. We didn't know yet that everything would change in a month. In a phone conversation, my mother confessed to me that she bought a GPS tracker a few weeks ago. Shockingly, it turned out that my father does not devote as much time to work as he claimed and often visits budget motels. At that moment, reality hit me hard. I trusted her words but decided not to tell my wife about it as it was too serious a matter to treat lightly. The consequences could ruin my parents' marriage if it turned out that my father was unfaithful. When I came to work, I quietly inquired about my father's work schedule and found out that he does not devote as much time to her as he claims. Having received this information, I was going to discuss it with my brothers and sisters, hoping that we could turn to my father together before the situation worsened. It was very important to approach this issue delicately, as a peaceful resolution of the situation was extremely important. My parents decided to separate at this stage of their lives. Despite all the difficulties they faced together, shortly after my mother informed me about the GPS installed in my father's car, she called me to tell me that she noticed a pattern in the fact that he visits a certain hotel at a certain time. Worried, she asked me to go with her to meet him at the hotel. Despite being busy at work, I immediately put everything on hold to join her, hoping to defuse the situation and prevent further escalation. Such collisions can be dangerous, and I sincerely worry about the safety of my mother or everyone involved in them. When we arrived at the hotel, each in our own car, I noticed my father's car parked in the parking lot. Mom, who had already arrived, was patiently waiting for me in the hall. How she found out the number of the room where my father was staying, I can't say for sure. Perhaps she asked the receptionist or someone she knew. However, such details did not occupy my attention. All I knew was that I had made it to the lobby. At my mother's insistence, we went to room 256, the supposed place of residence of my father and his mistress. While we were walking to the elevator, an unusual meeting took place between my mother and the cleaner. Their exchange of opinions seemed strangely familiar to me, and I was at a loss when the woman joined us in the elevator. Is it possible that my mother used the services of this hotel employee, or maybe the so-called hostess was just masquerading as her? The whole situation resembled a premeditated plan. Feeling all the doubtfulness of what was happening, I cautiously offered my mother a more reasonable course of action. At first, my mother and I were asked to wait in the hall, but she refused. Standing at door 256, we positioned ourselves so that we could not be seen through the peephole. The cleaner knocked on the door and announced herself as a cleaner. At that moment, I heard my father's voice coming from room 256. He firmly replied that he refused the services of a cleaner, but the persistent housekeeper continued to discuss the payment for the call. Not wanting to let him go, the disappointment in her father's voice was obvious, and eventually, he got tired of her insistence. He decided to open the door to reveal her intentions. We rushed into the room with the determination of law enforcement agencies, forcing Mom and me to make a loud entrance. My father collapsed on the floor in fright. It was important for Mom to reveal the identity of the woman, and we were surprised to see her trying to hide under the blanket. As soon as my mom and I entered the room, our world collapsed when we saw my father and my wife together. We were shocked and speechless. My father continued to pace restlessly, raising both hands above his head, leaving us in complete silence. I was completely confused and disoriented. My wife was lying, hidden under the blankets, as if we didn't notice her presence. Arriving at the hotel with the intention of preventing my mother from taking out her anger on another woman and my father, I suddenly felt weak and depressed, which forced me to leave the room in search of a breath of fresh air. When I went out, I could hear the echoes of my mother's threats against my wife and father. Finding peace in the corridor, I sank into the seat, trying to comprehend the deep suffering that had just unfolded before my eyes. The revelation was excruciatingly painful. The shattered illusion of a stable and loving family continues to haunt me, traumatizing me to this day. The betrayal on the part of my father and wife deeply pierced my heart. I still distinctly remember my mother pulling my wife away from the bed in tears, but I was too numb to fully realize what was happening. It seemed to me that my world was collapsing, and I felt an irresistible desire to cease to exist. The future seemed bleak, and I realized that life would never be the same again. Despite all the instincts that prompted me to leave the hotel and leave, I could not leave my mother. Anger was not my immediate emotion. Instead, I was gripped by a deep sense of betrayal. I felt completely drained and exhausted. My father desperately called my name, begged for forgiveness, but I couldn't bring myself to look him in the eye. I understood that I had to stay strong for Mom's sake. The news we had just received would undoubtedly cause her great pain. With great effort, I persuaded my mother to let go of my wife's grip, and together we left the hotel, leaving my mother in tears. I walked my mom home, where her crying didn't seem to stop. Her anxiety was growing, and she resorted to taking medication to relax. Soon, she fell into a deep sleep on the sofa in the living room. The day was, to put it mildly, incredibly tiring. It was my responsibility to pick up the children from kindergarten, as I could not rely on my wife. She was upset after the incident with my mother at the hotel. Before leaving, I made sure to inform my two brothers and sisters about the situation and asked them to book tickets for the earliest flight home. Our family was in an unprecedented crisis, which turned out to be irreparable. The only source of strength that kept me moving forward was the well-being of my children. I picked them up from kindergarten and brought them home after learning that she had left them there so that she would have some time for herself. I decided to give preference to my mother's well-being. When I received numerous apologies from my wife in a long text message, instead of reading it, I decided to focus on work, as is usually the case in times of crisis. But this time, I felt I had to ensure my mother's safety, so I took a break from work and stayed at home with her. When my brothers and sisters returned to the city, my father was able to return home. Unfortunately, I was not present at their meeting with him because I could not be in the same room with him. In my eyes, he is no longer a part of my life. It was very important for each member of our family to handle this situation in their own way. Personal well-being came to the fore. The consequences of this revelation were emotionally and mentally strong, which led to feelings of betrayal, anger, and self-doubt. Accepting the fact that our family will never be the same turned out to be an incredibly difficult path. I had to come to terms with the loss of both my wife and father. The idyllic image of a united and friendly family was completely destroyed. Finally, 3 days after the day of discovery, my wife returned home. We sat together, trying to be polite in an attempt to deal with the upcoming path. It is important to recognize the circumstances of the current situation. She admits that the affair began shortly after the birth during my stay in the hospital. She explains this by the fact that she had a huge responsibility to take care of all the children, and the exceptional support of my father brought them closer together. She claims that he made her feel indebted to him, especially when my mother was with me in the hospital. One evening when they were watching TV together, the situation suddenly escalated. They continued to meet secretly until they felt that my mother was beginning to suspect something. There seemed to be a shift in dynamics between them, which was probably caused by some deep tension. My mother, as always astute, felt that my wife was a threat. When we moved out of my parents' house and settled in our own apartment, I was busy with work most of the time and therefore did not notice that my wife was having an affair with my own father. But my mother was not blind to the truth. It was at this time that she began to suspect my father of infidelity. Unfortunately, not all stories have a happy ending, and this one was no exception. When I talked to my wife about her actions, I decided to be honest and straightforward. I informed her of my decision to divorce to ensure my mother's well-being and to ensure my father's departure from home. My brothers and sisters came to the city. It is obvious that my father's actions destroyed our family, leaving no opportunity to return to the old life. About 9 months have passed since the day everything collapsed, and I have successfully completed the divorce process with my wife, but my parents' divorce is delayed due to the complicated division of property acquired in marriage. Although I understand that hatred is a strong emotion, it accurately describes the strong feelings that my mother and I have towards my father. I don't engage in any conversations with him. When we accidentally cross paths at work, he has no meaning in my life anymore. After our separation, my ex-wife returned to teaching, and now we have equal rights to custody of our children. The accident I got into on a motorcycle continues to have an impact on me, and it is unlikely that I will ever fully recover, both mentally and physically. Part of me was left on the side of the road, and the other part was lost in the hotel. Nevertheless, there is no doubt that despite the huge losses caused by this accident, I continue to live for the sake of my children. My mother and my father decided to live together. Fortunately, her father convinced her that it was better to leave the children to live with me and my mother so that they would have more time for each other. I was glad of this decision because besides my mother, there is no one who will raise my children better. I worked a lot. My mom took care of my children and the house while my ex-wife and father were having fun. But out of happiness, it didn't last long. While on vacation abroad, they got into a terrible plane crash, and during a collision, their car flew off a mountain serpentine. Fortunately or unfortunately, they both died. Apparently, karma befell them both, preventing them from enjoying happiness while my mother and I suffered from their betrayal. Story 3. I recently found out that my wife, with whom I have been married for 4 years, participates in the creation of adult videos with other men. Before marriage, we dated for 2 years, and now we have a wonderful 2-year-old child. At the age of 28, she worked as a high school teacher and earned significantly less than me. That's why I made the decision for her to become a stay-at-home mom. When we first started dating, one of the aspects that attracted me to my wife was her adventurous nature in the bedroom. She was constantly striving for new sensations, whether it was exploring different styles of underwear or discovering unconventional interests. Among her predilections were leather clothing, while I found pleasure in taking on a dominant role in our intimate moments. Despite the fact that I was comfortable in this dynamic, there was one aspect that presented a problem for me: her strong attraction to spanking and enjoying pain during certain actions. These preferences caused me some anxiety and a sense of unease. I found myself in a situation where, at her request, I had to use a slap, but it did not give me pleasure. She wanted me to take the initiative and initiate it without her asking, but it wasn't natural for me. Unfortunately, after the wedding, our relationship faced difficulties related to domestic pressure. It became difficult to maintain a constant desire to surprise and be surprised, and my busy work schedule left an imprint on our intimate life. Coming home tired while she was at home all day and waiting for me to match her energy has become an impossible task. Apart from the fact that we had to move to the other side of the country away from loved ones, our relationship became even more strained after the birth of my daughter. My wife faced difficulties in losing excess weight and went through a period of depression. These years have been the hardest in our marriage, and we have thought about parting more than once. Yet, we decided to seek the help of a marriage counselor, hoping to save our union. Having decided to regain self-confidence, my wife started working out in the gym every day, gradually regaining her confidence and successfully shedding baby weight. The only thing that has been lost forever is her old sense of adventurism. Although it didn't particularly bother me, it took a significant load off my shoulders. Sometimes she tried to imagine me negligent because of constant employment at work, but I sincerely believed that I lead a typical balanced life. I sincerely believed that I was providing her with everything she needed. I trusted her with access to my bank account. She made purchases without consulting me, but I preferred not to pay attention to it, believing that if she considers it necessary to buy something, then it really is necessary. But then doubts began to creep into my head. After returning from a week-long work conference where I had to spend 5 nights out of the house, I remember the moments when I called my wife and noticed her shortness of breath. But she easily brushed it off, explaining it by playing with our child. Naively, I didn't pay attention to the suspicious activities going on behind my back, partly because she was a stay-at-home mother, and I was constantly working 12 hours a day. Despite being tired when I returned home and sought intimacy, my wife was always open to it. With such a reaction, I had no reason to suspect her of infidelity. However, one Friday evening when I came home, I found my wife taking a bath. Coincidentally, I was brushing my teeth in the same bathroom. When she got up from the bath to get a towel, I saw numerous handprints on her buttocks. This puzzled me a lot since at least 2 months had passed since my last slap. The presence of these traces simply did not fit into my head. Time seemed to freeze. I stood there unable to move, and all my thoughts were absorbed in the possible consequences of this imprint. At that moment, it dawned on me that her once bright and insatiable desire for intimacy could not just disappear overnight. I had to come to terms with the fact that if I'm not meeting her needs, then someone else is doing it. The weight of suspicion weighed on me as I mentally went over every dubious case in my memory. In one case, I called her, she said she was in a certain place, but deep down, I knew she was being dishonest. But I brushed her off, blaming it on her desire to hide the connection with an unpleasant friend. Accordingly, I justified her behavior. But now I began to evaluate those events of the past in a different way. Without hesitation, I approached her while she was drying herself with a towel and asked her to turn around so that I could clearly see the handprint on her buttocks. I asked whose hand it belonged to, but she kept silent, deliberately avoiding the answer. Finding my question absurd, she abruptly left the bath, angry. I grabbed her hand tightly and shook her, causing her to cry out in pain, demanding an honest answer. She gave a ridiculous explanation, saying that she had hit herself, not knowing whether it was sincere or sarcastic. She tried to leave, wrapped in a towel. I have never resorted to physical violence against my wife in anger, but I was very upset by her condescending attitude when I asked her a serious question. In frustration, I wrapped my arms tightly around her biceps, urging her to answer. She expressed her dissatisfaction, saying that I was not emotionally ready for her and that work was more important to me than our relationship. In response, I asked if her actions implied treason, and she tried to free herself from my grip. The revelation that she had been caught made her very upset. Instead of taking responsibility, she shifted the blame onto me for working hard and supporting our family, using this as an excuse for her infidelity. A heated argument ensued during which she deliberately raised past issues that we had already discussed in therapy, trying to distract my attention from the indisputable evidence of her infidelity. Her actions clearly indicated a desire to deflect blame from herself and avoid a collision with the truth. During our heated argument, I resorted to name-calling, calling her cold and considering her worthless. Emotions were running high, and we were shouting at each other. In the midst of our confrontation, I asked her about a possible affair, to which she stated that she had an affair with one of my superiors. Unfortunately, I didn't pay attention to our daughter's crying, which came from the next room. Overcome with anger, I impulsively reacted to her offensive remark, demanding that she leave my house and go to a man whom she considered superior to me. I dragged her out of the house by force, persuading her to leave. When I closed the door behind me, she continued to scream and beat on it tirelessly. Apparently, a concerned neighbor alerted the authorities, and an officer appeared on the doorstep. Waiting for their arrival seemed to me a long time, during which my wife persistently knocked on the door, and our daughter sobbed inconsolably. The sight of a frustrated child only calmed my anger, as I realized that this was not an ideal environment for raising and educating a child. I felt an irresistible urge to leave our house, at least for the night, in search of solace. Unfortunately, my actions took a worse turn when I hurriedly kicked my wife out of the house, dressed only in a towel. This did not bode well with the police, who insisted that I allow her to enter the house, to which I reluctantly agreed. However, taking advantage of the moment of commotion, I quietly took possession of her phone and set off from our house to spend the night at the nearest hotel. Arriving at the hotel, I found that her phone was easily accessible to me since she had kept the same password since the beginning of our relationship. Looking through her phone, I found out that a few months ago, my wife told her mother about her dislike for me and her desire to end our marriage. At first, her mother tried to convince her of the need to establish a relationship, but eventually gave up and advised her to find another man through her friend. Surprisingly, my wife replied to her mother, assuring her that there was no need to worry since she already had many potential suitors. She expressed her emotional detachment and made it clear that the efforts aimed at saving our marriage are not worth the result. In addition, she made it clear that, in her opinion, the reward for working on our relationship is not worth the effort. In a conversation with a friend, to whom I treated negatively, she said that she had turned to a lawyer for advice about a divorce but at the same time mentioned the need to achieve financial independence beforehand. Interestingly, this coincided with the period when she began to quietly withdraw money from my account and hide it in an unknown direction. She confessed to her friend that, according to her lawyer, our marriage has not yet reached the length that is necessary to receive significant compensation. In this regard, she expressed her intention to remain married until she finds a more suitable partner. Then she decided to stay with me until the moment when she will have the right to receive alimony. It was unpleasant for me to realize that she intended to use me to her advantage until that moment came. I was shocked by this discovery and could hardly believe that I had been living with such an evil person all this time. Even worse, I found text messages from a random man on her phone that talked about past relationships. Even more worryingly, I found videos of her having an intimate relationship with another man. To top it all off, she had the audacity to invite another stranger into our house. Judging by the date of the video, I was at work at that time, and my daughter was in the house. When I came across additional photos on her phone, I discovered a collection that raised doubts about her fidelity in the early stages of our marriage. In these pictures, she was depicted in provocative outfits, demonstrating her involvement in various unconventional preferences. I was especially alarmed by the fact that these photos were taken before the birth of our daughter. Moreover, in numerous photographs, she was depicted in leather clothes and in frank positions, even when she went to visit her parents. It is worth noting that these visits to the parents were made before the conception of our daughter. In addition, I discovered intimate photos and underwear taken by myself, which further increased the bewilderment. I was stunned when I came across something in her phone that seemed familiar to me. It was a collection of emojis hiding her face, which made me think that she was sending them to other guys. To my surprise, I also found a 2-year-old photograph of her with 2 men, which may have indicated infidelity. Just by examining the contents of her phone, it became obvious that she was in a relationship with at least 3 men, advertising herself as a submissive person. In addition, I found explicit photos that she shared with other men, as well as a video showing a different type of power dynamics. Perhaps it was because of my absent-mindedness that I never felt the desire to check her phone. At that moment, I realized that her love for me was never real, and her marriage was just a convenience for her. The pain was unbearable because I sincerely believed that we had a loving and devoted family. Doubts began to torment me, spreading even to our beloved daughter. When she returned home from the hotel the next day, she continued to behave defiantly. I suppressed my feelings and hid the truth because I felt like nothing more than a financial resource for her. But now that the truth has become known, she has decided that she has nothing more to lose. Unfortunately, she was wrong. After returning her phone, I told her that I had witnessed everything and knew all the details. In a sarcastic tone, I suggested that she pursue a career as an adult actress. Unexpectedly for me, she replied that she could and would do it. She put all the blame on me, claiming that I pushed her away and neglected her. She went so far as to accuse me of cheating last year, which was a completely false statement. Until now, she insists that the infidelity began only in March. To dispel all doubts, I decided to do a DNA test for my daughter, and it confirmed that she was indeed my biological child. The most annoying thing is that despite my efforts to formalize equal custody, my lawyer informed me that I still have to pay alimony, which came as a surprise to me. According to him, I am the main earner, and my income significantly exceeds her income, despite her current employment as a teacher. I was pleased to realize that in the end, she would return to a profession that she despises and which brings a meager salary. It was only a matter of time before she came to the realization that she would not find a person comparable to me, and the problems of a single mother would become obvious. During our trial, her lawyer tried to convince the judge that she deserved alimony, but his efforts were ultimately unsuccessful. She had the opportunity to return to work at any time. Also, I was lucky to have an experienced lawyer who used the evidence I collected from her phone to present her as dishonest and lying. It became obvious that she entered into our marriage without sincere intentions, since she was unfaithful for 2 of the 4 years of our life together. Currently, I am obliged to pay child support, knowing full well that she is likely to spend money on herself while I continue to be responsible for acquiring everything necessary for our daughter, despite the fact that custody of her is carried out in equal shares. Even if we rewrote this text, the content would remain the same. She would have continued to receive alimony. It still hurts me that my wife and daughter don't live under the same roof with me. I didn't like growing up in a single-parent family. I firmly believe that she will try to reconcile with me as soon as she realizes that the luxurious lifestyle is over. I try to see my daughter every day. In the evenings, I take her to the park and have a great time with her. I feel very bad that my daughter doesn't live with me. I even talked to my ex-wife and asked her to let our daughter live with me. In this case, my parents were ready to move closer to me to help with my daughter, but my ex was totally against it. But one day, when I took my daughter to visit my parents, who are retired, my mother, who works as a pediatrician, examined my daughter and noticed several bruises on her body. Mom told me about it in a panic. It was clear that my ex-wife was beating our child. My parents and I did not hesitate to contact the police with a statement. Less than a week later, the guardianship authorities came to my ex-wife's apartment with a check. They found a lot of violations in the maintenance of the child. There was also a medical worker who examined my daughter and realized that she really beats my daughter. During the investigation, neighbors were interviewed, and they confirmed that they often hear the screams of my ex and the loud crying of my daughter. In general, the inspector found a lot of evidence that my ex-wife is a terrible mother. After the trial, as I expected, my ex-wife was deprived of her parental rights and sentenced to a year in a penal colony. I am grateful to my mother for her attentiveness and for taking care of my precious daughter.